Very much. Well, as we're just hearing, that AI is not just a buzzword these days for you, it's in your DNA effectively. I want to start the conversation by talking about this climate that we're in. Our news flow is very fast at the moment. You wake up and effectively there's another huge deal on the table, or a company has grown in size just overnight to become one of the largest companies in the world. So many moving pieces. You think this is a pivotal time, it's a moment in time for some businesses with all this disruption coming?
I think it's an enormous time. So we've gone through a couple of eras of exponential growth. We had the first one around chips and then around networks. But this ability of machine learning to improve every day from data makes companies literally double their productivity every year because they're using AI to really learn from all their data.
So this is unlike any other time that you've seen in your career.
I think the last time I saw this was in the 90s, the early days of the internet and then mobile, when it just really took off, created new businesses and transformed them. To me, this is faster and bigger than that because it's not just distribution, it's the data itself. So everything is literally getting smarter every day.
Let's talk about that data and the power of it. Businesses can effectively go digging into their data, much of the information they've already had at their disposal to find enormous value. It's quite interesting because I think Mark Zuckerberg got it very quickly. He knew what he was sitting on. He knew the value of that data. But a lot of other companies have data too. They just haven't realized how to unlock it.
Well, listen, I think the consumer platforms believed all the data should come into a search platform or a social network. 20% of the world's information is searchable, but 80% is not. It's owned by companies and by individuals in a private way. The reason we focused on Watson was to have AI for private data or AI for business and professional use. We don't want our medical records, our banking records, our secrets and our IP as companies on the public internet. We want to use AI for private data, and that's what Watson's all about.
There's a stunning stat that you've given us. About 80% of data is behind firewalls. How do companies learn from that data and unlock the potential using AI?
Well, part of what we've done with Watson is to make it pretty accessible through microservices. So you actually can create new software where you use these AI algorithms, but in an application that lives in your company where the insights stay with you. And that's why we see hospitals and law firms and accounting firms. Here, SNCF, Orange Bank, Credit Mutual all had examples of how they've become smarter on their own private data using Watson.
Can you give us an example of how this works in practice?
Yep, so certainly. So those in France know there's some issues with SNCF right now with changes in the schedule, strikes and things. Literally 4 weeks, they taught Watson how to read the schedule, how to understand real-time movements, and how to communicate with everyone in France what's going on each train schedule real-time. So it created a personal, quick way to do customer service. So it was a great example. Yesterday, Nicolas Thierry from Credit Mutuel spoke about the fact that all 5,500 people who touch customers there have Watson as the assistant to make sure that it listens to the conversation and real time gives you the best answer immediately for each client.
We've spoken to a lot of CEOs here that are tackling all the big tech challenges, but it feels as though at this point in time, if you unlock the data and learn from it through AI, it's not just the executives that are on this learning curve, it's employees right across the organization. Talk us through that learning curve for many thousands of employees and companies.
Yeah, for us, the real empowerment is that when these tools are made for each employee, it's almost like a stagiaire. You have your own personal assistant who can learn your entire organization, learn all their facts, and get you the information real time. And another good example are nurses at the Mayo Clinic who use this around breast cancer. It made them all smarter faster because it gave them all the knowledge of everything that had been done in the field immediately. So right at your fingertips, you've got all the information of your company to get more productive. But it's empowering everyone. It's not an elite technology, it's an everyday technology.
So you're saying it's motivational, because one of the big issues for a lot of corporates is how do you keep people engaged in the organization? Everybody keeps hearing about a startup here or someone who made money overnight, and they sort of start to question, do I want to be working in a big company? So you're saying it's a motivational tool for some executives to keep their staff on board.
Yeah, for me, what I love about it, and I'm seeing it within IBM itself, AI takes care of all the bureaucracy, all the rote tasks, and big companies have this. They have a lot of rote tasks to keep things coordinated. Let Watson take care of that. Free up your time to do creative things, to find new solutions, to do more interesting work. So we do find people are much happier with their jobs when supported by Watson to do the simple things.
When we talk about data this week, it's from a certain perspective. GDPR, new data protection rules came into force today. It feels as though the consumer side has been battling the regulator about what to do with that data. What happens now as big business, small business starts to unlock some of the data they have behind the firewall? How do they ensure that they get it right, that they do the right things with that data and are not in breach of regulations?
Well, listen, for us, GDPR was a non-issue because it actually just leveled the playing field to say, be careful to not suck all the data into a couple of companies. The world will be better with competition on data, but we've always believed in a set of principles around trust and transparency. As AI is in our everyday life, we have to know that the data is real, that it wasn't changed, that we know how the algorithm produced its recommendation so we can test it. So there has to be absolute transparency and real control. There's a lot of competitive advantage to a company from its data, and for us, it's protection. So, to have some regulations in GDPR, for us is a good thing because it means the world is going to be more fair, and in fact, everyone's going to have control and advantage from their data.
The world is not equal, though, because there are different rules from the United States, as the French president said yesterday, virtually unregulated, versus China, which is over-regulated. And he said, Europe's got the balance right. Do you think Emmanuel Macron was correct in his assumption of how regulation plays out globally?
Listen, we work with governments around the world, and so as a global company, if we're going to work in Europe, once we're compliant with GDPR, it will apply everywhere. So I do think Europe took real leadership on this, and I do think they really thought ahead 1 or 2 steps. You have to know where this is going. I mean, it's easy to just begin to have and consumers do this, just put all your data into a published social network or in a search engine. But when you think ahead, it's going to be very important that people are responsible with their data.
Let's just delve a little bit deeper then around AI and ethics, because everyone here is trying to wrap their head around it. Some people are actively engaged in AI. I mean, I just spoke to a startup before that's using AI. How do you ensure that there is responsibility across industry around the use of AI when there have been fairly stark warnings about the ramifications if we get it wrong?
Yeah, listen, so we spent a lot of time on this. So today, Watson doubles every year. So right now we have 16,000 active Watson applications in 20 industries in 45 countries. And across all of them, we really work to have an ethical standard, which said, A, that you're using this to benefit humanity, B, that you're going to be transparent about the conclusions. We're not going to hide from the algorithms. We're going to put them in the open, and it's in partnership with humans to make sure it's right. And then, of course, behind that, make sure the data is always true and accurate and protected. And for us, this is why people can be comfortable with important issues like oncology, radiology, law, accounting. Things that depend on trust really need ethical standards in the AI underneath them.
AI seems unstoppable, though, and the companies that are working with it are bringing together different services onto one platform, and the AI keeps on learning. How do you ring-fence something like that? There's no off switch for AI.
Well, I don't know. There's no off switch for the internet before that. So I don't know that you need to ring fence it. I believe all of our clients who are using it can point to revenue gain, customer satisfaction, productivity from it. So of course they're going to want to keep going. It's creating shareholder value, and more importantly, it's creating customer value. So I don't think it needs to be ring fenced. What I do think is essential is that it be transparent so that you can always know what's happening. And if there are things that you want to course correct, if you've got new learning, you make sure that comes in.
One of the problems right now is that the people who've commented most around AI are two people that have had execution issues in their own business. Elon Musk, getting the Teslas on the road, and then you've got Mark Zuckerberg, which after the data privacy scandal, who would believe anything he says around ethics and AI? So my point is, who do we look to in the industry to really trust that they know what they're talking about with AI, and whether it's going to kill humanity or whether it's going to be a great opportunity? Who needs to be talking about this? Who can we really lean into to show leadership on AI?
Listen, I think we're trying to play our part, but also bring in the conversation around AI for professions, which have always had ethics, and make sure those ethics are extended into AI. Related to that, I believe AI is stronger with diversity. So bias is the other kind of core component. Anti-bias is the core component of the way we approach ethics. Making sure the trainers happen around the world. We're bringing in women in Africa, we're bringing in folks from the Middle East, we're bringing in folks from virtually every country. You need all genders. We really need to make sure that the AI is trained by diversity as opposed to a few people on the West Coast of the United States. Because as AI becomes open and transparent, I count on humanity as a whole to keep it ethical and honest.
You've just taken us to the end point, I think, about where you would like AI to go, but we all know there's going to be a few missteps. There's going to be a lot of bias with the use of AI initially. I mean, just when you think about it, again, I hate to go back to the Facebook example, but it's the one we all know, where you now have third-party auditors effectively monitoring the sort of content that's put up on the internet and taken away. So there's someone making a decision actively. How in business can you have a lack of bias, that there are also clear lines of responsibility about who's making the decisions? You know, AI could be rolled out for workers. We're battling diversity problems still in the workplace. I mean, the amount of women in leadership positions. How on earth does AI stop bias in the workplace?
Well, so first of all, we're building AI to detect bias. So we actually use AI on the AI to say, when the inference happened, does it seem to be biased in one direction or another? So it can be tested by AI the way it was by humans. Secondly, I think you have to be very careful to go at the right pace. This grows exponentially, so you can double every year, but you want to make sure you're testing each step of the way. Part of the thing I insist on is that you don't just give the AI answer, you give the reasons behind. So for example, in Watson for Oncology, we'll give a recommendation on a course of action, but we'll give 3 choices and the answers underneath it. Stuff you wouldn't find in a search engine. This is important because an oncologist can then look at that data and make their own decision. And as they make a decision, Watson will learn from that so that bias comes out next time. This has to be done transparently. It cannot be a black box.
Let's try and get into the regulation a little bit more, because this week has shown us how far European regulators can take the rules and standards if they want to. AI, Andrus Ansip from the European Commission has been working behind the scenes laboriously to come up with some form of a standard and some guidelines, and served it up to policymakers and said, you know, here, do something with it. Do you think the Europeans are now going to take leadership on those AI standards and guidelines, and it might be a little bit like data protection rules we've just seen this week?
Well, certainly we're working with them, but I honestly believe business needs to take a leadership role. I think we need to stand up for principles. I think we need to not be expedient. The challenge with any regulation is it's got to keep up with the technology, and this technology is moving at a rapid pace, faster than mobile, faster than digital. It's the fastest moving technology we have ever seen. So it's important that we have this collaboration between policymakers and businesses so that things move and there are good standards as the technology evolves.
Let's talk about skills for AI, because a lot of people in the room might be thinking, how do I get involved? How do I not be left behind? Because what we know about AI so far and what we've heard is that it may replace a number of workers and may remove some jobs as we know it. How do people get AI ready from a skills perspective?
Well, so listen, the other thing that's nice about AI is it's becoming increasingly accessible. And in fact, when we can work with computers in everyday language, people who are not traditional programmers can get a programming. One of the things we're working on in the labs is that AI can actually write the code. So, you know, for me, we want to make this more accessible to all people. number one. Number two, we are focused on having skills that don't require, an advanced degree. So a lot of what we're focused on are 14-year schools, so you get a basic associate's degree before you graduate. We have a program called PTech that does this. We're putting one in France now. We're in 4 other continents already. There's a lot we can do in the education system to help people be ready with basic skills to create what we call a new-collar job. It's not a blue-collar job, but it's not a white-collar job. It's a job that is a little bit smarter, uses a little more technology, and people advance. I would also say, as you use AI, it helps you be effective faster. I think everyone is going to have the chance for less manual, more interesting, more thoughtful job. I think this is very good for job creation.
Actually, that's one of the enlightening conversations I've had this week. It felt as though if you want to be part of the future, you needed to go back to university and do some form of a STEM course. It's like, oh gosh, not another stint at university, please. But it seems as though you can actually skill up, that you can have on-the-job training, that you can take some of the online courses. There are ways to broaden out your experience if you are already an experienced professional.
Yeah, well, listen, we certainly need more people in STEM, and I'm very focused on this, especially with women. We want to double the STEM population. But to be clear, AI needs the humanities, AI needs the liberal arts, AI needs medicine, AI needs philosophy. We want to make sure that AI does not become robotic, but it actually helps with the emotional side of humanity. Humanity should continue to be fun and joyful and full of pleasure, and that's going to take all sorts of skills. So the whole world is not going to be about STEM jobs. All jobs will be enhanced by AI.
I've spoken to a lot of companies, and you see many good companies that don't want their workers to be left behind. A lot of Swiss companies actually willing to reinvest in their workforce to retrain them so that there are opportunities because they think it's good for their own company as well. But we all know not all companies are the same, and some, if they can see a cost saving, would say, let's just get rid of those jobs, a couple of hundred here or there, it's good for our bottom line. So it feels as though a lot of individuals are going to have to actively seize the moment. They're going to have to take these online courses themselves. And this is where the opportunity comes in with IBM Watson.
Well, it certainly does, and Watson's helped develop courses on Coursera and Udacity. So we have over 1 million people who have taken basic AI courses already this year. So, and we want to keep increasing that. We do encourage every company to have a little bit of time in people's lives to be able to be curious, to learn new things. It's an exciting moment. We're going to be able to solve problems we never thought were solvable with AI. People have to be curious. They have to keep learning on that. And we have to create a culture for lifelong learning. It's not just going back to learn AI. It's really staying current on it every day.
One of the problems with technology is that you feel as though it might widen the gaps in society. And after the financial crisis, we know a lot of people have been left out of the workforce, have not had the right skill set to get re-involved, that some countries have suffered more than others. How do you close that gap where you have different levels of wealth, different levels of education, different levels of development? How do you ensure that this type of learning is available to all?
Well, listen, I think it's a big issue. I don't have a simple answer on that. I do believe education is the seminal issue of this era. We really have to educate people to become lifelong learners. We're investing $500 million in our own population around the world. We're working with government partners around the world. We're working with other companies around the world. We have to make lifelong education part of a job. You don't just finish your university degree, start your job, and stop learning. AI is growing so fast that everybody has to accept that curiosity and lifelong learning is part of being happy in life.
You've got PTech, Pathways to Technology, started in Brooklyn, 200 schools, 4 countries, not in France yet.
But we just announced this week with Macron that we're committed to putting a PTech in France.
So this basically helps underprivileged communities, graduates from high school going straight into tech. It sounds like a modern day apprenticeship.
Well, it is apprenticeship and mentoring for sure. I think that actually giving people the possibility that they can see that learning is fun and they can be productive quickly is great. In Brooklyn, we have more African-American males in PTech than any other school. and we have the highest graduation rate. So there's just a motivation and an inspiration of having people see that lifelong learning can be fun and can give them more interesting work to do. So, for us, this is about real leadership and inspiration.
Let's talk about AI and the positive impact it can have on the world. Yesterday you announced a call for code.
Yes.
Talk us through what that is.
Listen, call for code is something I hope all of us can learn to be developers, but having the world's developers come together with new data to solve problems is key. We did this in partnership with the American Red Cross and the United Nations Human Rights Organization. We saw a big problem in the world. As the environment's changing, we're having more natural disasters than ever before. How do we do a better job of predicting natural disasters, using AI to prepare for natural disasters, helping companies and communities to recover from natural disasters? There's a lot we can do with AI on that. So we're putting millions of dollars out there in terms of free code, in terms of using the IBM cloud. We're bringing people together because we think this call for code can really make an enormous difference to one of the great problems that people face every day, which is how to deal with natural disasters.
Having worked in news for about 20 years, I know that it's all about response times in emergency situations. It would seem with the capabilities of AI, you can respond much, much quicker in many of these situations, whether it's floods, earthquakes, or bushfires even.
Yeah, absolutely. And we saw this with the hurricanes in North America this year. Our ability to work with the Red Cross for them to know precisely what was going to happen and when, to use AI to organize their volunteers, to have people pre-positioned, to have the energy companies ready to turn the energy back on. Now I also saw countries where this didn't work well, so we have some work to do to make AI for all. But certainly AI can help us in enormous ways in this very human challenge of a natural disaster.
We've got just a couple of minutes left, so let's just talk about France, because it's been an amazing week here at Viva Technology, and which started with the Tech for Good Summit too. What do you make of the momentum on the ground here in France around this startup culture? Do you believe it? Do you think it's happening?
Listen, I have been a Francophile for years. I worked here for a while with Publicis. I've never seen such energy as I see in France right now. What I love about this startup culture here is it really is embracing creativity and individualism, but it's not just startups that are literally on their own company. You saw earlier LVMH, we see BNP Paribas, Credit Mutual. All the French enterprises are also understanding they want to protect their data, so this is why we work with them on AI, but they want to create ecosystems around them to solve problems. And I think this collaboration of startups and large enterprises is unparalleled. The environment here can actually, I think, create a new way that technology works. We had a certain model that worked in the digital era around a Silicon Valley ecosystem, but the French ecosystem is far more inclusive, and I think it's a great model for the world.
The French president wants to create an AI hub here in France, but the reality is AI is a two-horse race between the United States and China. Europe is well and truly lagging behind third, and France somewhere down the mix behind the likes of Germany and the UK. What's your message to France if they want to be an AI hub?
Well, listen, we're supportive of it. We announced 1,800 new AI jobs for us in France. First of all, you have to focus on the education. The university system here is spectacular, and most of the AI leaders in the world, many of them, I should say, not most, many of them come from France. So the right education, they've got the right environment and culture, they've got the right collaboration. I do not believe it's just between the US and China. There are things that are being done there at scale, but I honestly believe the culture here in France, and the fact that France is being global and connecting to the rest of the world, means the things that are invented here can work everywhere. So I think they're absolutely on the right track, and I plan to be in France more often, and we've got a great hub here.
Thank you so much for taking the questions. David Kenny, the Senior Vice President of IBM Watson and Cloud Platform.
Thank you.
Thank you. Merci.